Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for what is bound to be a very exciting panel today. We're going to be talking about what I think is actually one of the hottest and most important topics in this world that we find ourselves in, this television world, becoming the digital service aggregator of choice. This really is a competitive and dynamic market with a number of new entrants, including players like Apple, all targeting aggregation as their unique selling point, as they try to grab market share from some of the traditional players in the market. I'm joined by a fantastic panel of speakers today. I'll briefly introduce them and then we'll get straight into questions. So joining me today, we have Thomas Helbo. He is Chief Technology Officer and Exec Vice President for Technology of Tele2. That, of course, is the Scandinavian and Central European Telecoms Group. Alejandro Casal Gomez, who is Manager for TV Business and Development for KPN, the Dutch Telecoms Group. Guillaume Comel, Product Strategy Director for French telecoms giant Orange. Randolph Nikuta, who is Senior Consultant for Orbit, and Orbit is a consulting division within T-Systems, which itself is wholly owned by Deutsche Telekom. And finally, we have Gideon Gilbauer, EVP Product Solutions and Marketing for Media and Telecoms for the video and online cloud TV tech company Kaltura. So let's start with a few definitions, because I think those of us who've been in this business long enough have been through many waves of aggregation. At the end of the day, aggregating TV channels is what cable and satellite companies have always done. But I think today, when we talk about aggregation, we're talking about something a bit more advanced, a bit different from what some of us oldies perhaps think about. So let me start by asking, and I'm going to start with you, Giddy. What does aggregation mean today in terms of services, in terms of functionality, in terms of delivery to the end consumer?
Yes, I think indeed a lot has changed. And if we look a little bit, starting with a little bit of history first, over the last 5 years or so, what we used to call as the TV bundle, which was offered by pay TV operators, has been to an extent disaggregated by the emergence of multiple streaming services that are offering consumer choice, but are also sometimes confusing. And I think that the topic of super aggregation, as we call it, is really the re-aggregation of what has been disaggregated, meaning that ultimately consumers would like all of their video services or prefer to have all of their video services in one place. And super aggregators are those who are going to bring all those separate OTT streaming services in one coherent and consistent experience. And I think that if you look overall on the world, at least from our point of view, we see two entities going forward. One being super aggregators. These are typically telcos or other people who have access to subscribers who collect multiple types of streaming services, local linear services, on-demand services, and put them together. And the other are universal syndicators. So the Netflixes, the Amazons of the world, and in fact, every content provider who basically not only wants to go direct to consumer, but also syndicate the content into those super aggregators bundles. And that's how we see the world shaping up. And just to finish by saying that I think the TV bundle that those super aggregators would offer is going to be quite different from the old TV bundle. It is still going to have linear content and local content, sometimes maybe sports, but you could say that SVOD and transactional VOD as we know them in pay TV are going to die. And in fact, a lot of the on-demand selection is going to come from this aggregation of multiple OTT applications.
Let me just pick up on something you said there before I bring someone else in. Universal syndicators, I think you referred to in reference to Amazon and others. Are you saying that Amazon differs from an aggregation strategy and is subtly different in some way?
Yes, I think that if we look, and this is not just the big ones, if we look at Kaltura, where we have both telco and media customers, almost every media company, every broadcaster that we work with, every platform is looking to become not only a direct-to-consumer outlet, but a universal syndicator. So companies that actually take their content and deliver it worldwide into other super aggregators. And I'll give you just one example. Viacom18 in India, big customer of ours. They have a huge direct-to-consumer service, but they're also using our platform to deliver content directly into Virgin Media in the UK, to syndicate that content globally using OTT. So in some way, OTT and IP video are replacing the traditional syndication that we're used to and creating this new entity that I call Universal Syndicator.
Okay, an interesting distinction. Let me bring Randolph in, because I know that Deutsche Telekom is one of the telcos, certainly, who has looked to become a super aggregator for the German market. How do you view the concept of aggregation in the modern world?
Now, I think basically give the customer what he wants, but you have to be aware that with bundling to extend the old pay TV business models to the new aggregation models doesn't work. So I think we also have to adapt how we bundle and aggregate in the future when we integrate more and more OTT services. And that means offering more choice and flexibility to the customer in my eyes, and not just adding, stockpiling one bundle after the other and service. And the other part is what we see already working is that you make it a one-stop shop for the customer also when it comes to subscription and billing. So mostly aggregation sometimes is you add the service like Netflix and Amazon, but still the customer has to entertain a separate subscription ship and pay. So I think this is also a first convenience you can supply if you can put also the subscription management to one operator bill for your customer. And actually, next step would be like German NatCo is doing already, offering also hard bundles like integrating Netflix for a certain contract period into your subscription contract. So that means you get 2 years at a certain discount and you have certain benefits from it. But in my opinion, this is just a start. It's more like an extension of the old bundling business approach from pay TV. So what we need is provide new business models and also to attract other customers, because we are still fighting with the problem of the cord cutters and a younger population who can't afford, let's say, the normal expensive TV package. So in my opinion, we need also to experiment with business models when it comes to bundling and aggregation. And that could be also introducing AVOD models, for instance, and give the customer, let's say, more personalized choices when it comes to making his own bundles for his TV and VOD service experience. So that would be one step. And another domain which needs more experience in aggregation is the mobile domain. So how you transport the business logic to mobile customers for 5G, for instance. That's another question. And another thing is just aggregating VOD content and linear TV enough? So what about future content types? Cloud gaming, esports, VR music, so VR, AR content in the future. So that means the whole bundling aggregation game gets more complicated by that new content types will enter the aggregation game. So just a few thoughts on, but I think it's the right track to go.
So you've actually raised quite a few important points there around bundling as well. but also contract and contract length. So you talked about discounts for extended contracts. Advantages, I guess, if you're an end consumer with streaming apps and Netflix, Amazon, etc., is contract flexibility. In fact, month-to-month subscription. And I think it brings us to another concept, which is, do we actually need aggregation today, given the flexibility, the availability, the ease of use of the various video streaming apps in particular? Guillaume, do you have a view on that particular concept and point?
Yes, for sure. So first, what is sure is that in terms of customer needs, there are at least both. The first customer need is the customer need a device to get access to the app on their TV. So it could be a box, a smart TV, a dongle, or whatever. It should as well get a mode of subscription, should it be direct or indirect. So if you're the first to provide to your customer a box because it could be bundled to your access offer, and if you provide to him a way to subscribe simply to the services, you will be de facto an aggregator. And this is our view at Orange France. We are the first to provide, and we can be the first to get this position of aggregation. But if the question is what could be the other customers that could push the customers to pass through an aggregator, I will mention two reasons. The first is the fact that people are used to subscribe to 3 SVOD services, in addition of 1 or 2 pay TV channels. And as Randolph mentioned, it could be as well a music streaming service in addition, and then a future game streaming service. Means that at the end of the month, one household will manage up to 5 entertainment services with different billing systems, different accounts, and so on. So we think that aggregation, this non-aggregation, can create for certain customer segments a feeling of fatigue because you don't have an overview of everything you have, and of anxiety as well, especially for parents who no longer have control over what their children consume every day. The second reason is that we think that the fragmentation of the market creates complexity for the consumer, and this complexity is growing over time. If I take an example, if you take the top 2 most watched series on Netflix over the last years, you have The Office and you have Friends, so very well-known series. Friends is now back on Warner Media, is no more on Netflix. And The Office will be back on NBC Universal in a few months. And the customer doesn't know that. So this change of licenses from one service to the other will create complexity for the consumers to navigate among thousands of contents. So, and we know as well that this fragmentation of rights tends to favor piracy, okay? So there is a risk that the industry will find itself in a situation, in the similar situation that what happened in the field of sports. Meaning, if you have too much channels for watching sports, then you will get increasing piracy. So for these two reasons, we think that both the customer needs an aggregator, and we think that industry as well will need aggregation.
You've touched on a very important point, which we are going to come to, which is cross-navigation and being able to discover where Friends has, when it's left Netflix, where it's going to turn up next, etc. Before we move on to that, though, I want to bring Thomas in on this particular conversation about aggregation and apps and contract as well. And the traditional model for a pay TV company has been obviously 12 months contracts, tying in, etc. Is that still a sustainable way to sell subscription television?
Yes, I think it varies in different segments. So we try to segment customers into different areas and saying some customers still very much appreciate having a set-top box where they can turn on their TV, they can get the most usual linear content available in a lean back experience. For those customers, it's important to have diversity in the content. It's important to have news when it's available live. It's important to have live sports and those kind of things. And if you can package that with an offering that makes it attractive to other segments as well, so you can use the leverage you have on content into merging into different subscriptions. Because if you have a subscription which is an application only, where people use their own iPhone, they use their own Apple TV, or they use Chromecast to support and to stream their content, then it's a different business model, and you don't necessarily need to have a contract to maintain that relationship. So you have a different segment, you have a different business model, and you have a different way of approaching and a different channel strategy approaching these customers. So I think it's very important to have the different segments and be very clear on the separation and the difference between the segments.
So you're effectively saying you need different levels of offer, different technology, different ways of reaching different types of customer to remain competitive in this world today.
No, I don't necessarily think you need that, but if you want to be an aggregator, which I think most of the sort of traditional players see as their biggest benefit, then that is definitely something to have in your portfolio. I think going for a service where you have a fully aggregated solution, where you have the top content, the availability of content, you have the content discovery, you have the capability of providing content from multiple service providers or from multiple content sources. That is the key offering in getting this. And basically it's all about creating value to the customers. And I think as Guillaume mentioned, creating value by having a clear overview of where the content is available, and for the customers not to really worry about it being available on one content provider or the other content provider, but having the availability within one aggregated interface that creates value to most customers.
So a lot of what you're talking about could be used to describe the strategy that Apple is attempting. Most of you, other than the tech companies on this panel today, most of you come from what we would classify as traditional pay TV businesses. We've heard the word set-top box quite a few times already. Clearly, you now face intense competition from players who come from a background in which a set-top box is completely alien, who are bringing super slick interfaces to the market, and who have a number of other potential advantages, some of which we've talked about, like contracts, etc. How can older players or more traditional players compete against the likes of Apple? I would also include Amazon in that classification. But let's bring Alejandro in on this one. Alejandro, what's your view on the competitive edge that traditional players can bring, if at all?
Yeah, it's a very good question. A lot has already been said, of course, by my fellow colleagues. Yeah, I think from the operator perspective, we have to look at our track record. So we are doing already TV for, I think most of us, for already 15 years or so. And we have been delivering a very critical service, which is linear TV, to millions of customers for 15 years or more. And I think we should look at this as our strength as a traditional pay TV operator, the fact that we have been successfully delivering one of the most critical services, which is linear TV, to millions of consumers. And I think this is our strongest asset from that point of delivering linear TV to, well, let's increase this service in value with other services. So play the role as an aggregator and adding to this traditional linear TV proposition other over-the-top services or pay TV services offered by Netflix, by Disney, by other providers, and bring them having the warranty that we can provide the best user experience that anyone can. So I believe from a pay TV operator, our strength, besides what's already being said, is the track record we have, the install base, the footprint. So we have many customers, many happy customers who are already receiving our TV services, and we can deliver the same quality and the same best user experience also for our partners.
So you're coming at it at the angle of, this is what I can offer to you, a content provider, a Netflix or an Amazon. Coming back though to the customer, the end user, and it's been mentioned several times already, is about discovery and navigation. One of the problems, once you start dealing with Netflix, once you start dealing with Amazon, and I suspect also with the Studio Direct platforms that are coming online now, one of the issues with being able to offer very compelling and accurate content discovery across multiple platforms is data access. And there are two levels to that. There's metadata around the content itself. So how do I discover that Friends is the same Friends on this platform as on this one? But it's also around audience behavior metrics to allow additional targeting. How can you offer the service that several of you have already said is essential, that is cross-platform content discovery, without access to that data? And I'll bring Giddy back in on this.
Sure. I would want to, before I jump into that, one small comment on the interesting discussion so far, which is sometimes we tend to forget that aggregation doesn't even start with content. It is aggregation of services. The fact of the matter is that if you look ahead in 2023, according to different reports, there'll be 1.06 billion pay TV subscribers in the world. The majority of those are going to get TV from the same provider that they get broadband and cellular services from. So the aggregation of those services is actually the fundamental thing that drives consumers to take the TV service from that provider in the first place. And their ability to maintain the TV subscription in the home is dependent on super aggregation. Now, how do they do that, to your question, Guy? It is critical. So one of the things that we are seeing from the companies that we work with, both on the super aggregator side and universal syndicator, but mostly with the telco super aggregators, is the growing need for more sophisticated metadata enrichment and normalization solutions that sit actually at the beginning of the chain and could help our customers. And these are things that we've seen in customers like Vodafone with their Vodafone TV platform and others that help them actually normalize all this metadata and allow unified discovery for this metadata, which is super important, and give the consumers a choice, if need be, on where to access the content or decide exactly what the user interface experience is. So first of all, metadata normalization allows you to do that. Secondly, I say that it's no secret that Android TV, if there's one thing that Google got right in the last couple of years on TV is Android TV operator tier. That has been helping a lot of folks to get aggregation done right. It is not complete because it's client side and because you have to give away some control to Google if you want to play in that game. Still, it is a lot simpler, faster, low cost to entry in some cases, and that gives you the ability to aggregate on the client side a number of services. I think the last thing, which is less, so on the metadata side, I think it's getting easier and easier. I think that the thing that is not clear and will always be difficult is the behavior data. And at least there are different levels of behavior data, right? If you're a big provider like Netflix or Disney Plus, you would, or Amazon, you would have everything play from your application, and the data of what's being played there is yours. And the aggregator doesn't have exactly that data. While the aggregator has the data of what is done in their aggregated app, right? Or who is launching which app, and who is watching linear channels that are outside of those standalone applications. So that's something that Android TV doesn't solve, and I think come the time very soon that we will see solutions that could actually give a holistic view to everybody on not only what people have done around the applications, but what they watched in all of the applications, and the data will not be exclusively for one side going forward, in my mind.
So just to clarify before I bring someone else in on this, you're saying that in the near future, you expect that an operator hosting Netflix on platform without going to Netflix will be able to derive behavioral data from that Netflix audience?
I think it will be possible, yes, from some early signs that we're seeing in the market.
Okay. Randolph, again, bringing you in. I know that Deutsche Telekom has been looking at some of these issues. What is your view on data access, and also on the point Gidi just made about effectively potentially using tech and software to bypass access to, for example, Netflix viewing data?
That's a very critical issue indeed. And I think technology is providing now new opportunities to generate rich metadata. If you use latest machine learning based indexing technologies. But the problem is where do you have permission to index and when you aggregate, and this is more or less restricted to your own content, but you can't touch Netflix context or Amazon content and index it yourself again. So that is creating quite a problem. So we won't, I think, bypass that because the content owners of Netflix, Amazon and so like won't give us the permission to look inside the apps and do something additional with it. So this is really a problem. What we can do is, of course, improve as much as possible the content discovery by providing unified search. Or at Deutsche Telekom in Germany, we have deals with Netflix and Amazon so that content can be searched with our interface. So the customer gets back results where to find the content if he is searching for it. So he doesn't have to enter each app to look for his content. So I think this unified search is already a big progress. But metadata is helpful also for personalization, I think. And at least what we can do, and I think metadata has to match with improved personal profiles in order to make sense for the content discovery journey. So we also need to work and improve considerable also our personal profiling, what the customer is doing, and get better prediction what he would like to look at next. Because aggregation means content will become more and more in the future. And that is aggravating the problem of quick time to content. And I think metadata is just an enabler for, let's say, better access the relevant content types. But at the other hand, you need better predictive profiling of the customer wishes, what he would like to go to. And that can, if you look at our normal search interfaces, this isn't so helpful then, especially when you get back quite a list of results, and then you have to look into the list and find the right piece of content. So I think very important for the future aggregation game is also, besides metadata, a very good customer profiling and prediction what he would like to see next. So Deutschigum is working on this in order to improve also the user experience considerably with better personal profiling. And machine learning, like Google's knowledge graph, is providing certain enabler technologies to do this.
Okay. Let's talk about another aspect of aggregation and how it's changed with streaming and with the strategies of the content owners themselves. Again, when we think of traditional cable and satellite, it has always been about the aggregation of channels. Now that the studios and other large content owners are going direct, how does that change the business for you? And let me bring Thomas in on this one.
Yeah, well, I think that one important question to always keep in mind when looking at this is, well, what do the customers actually prefer? And I think that having a subset of multiple applications where the customers can find pieces of content. If you have, for instance, in the Nordic region, you have the most popular football rights for instance, Premier League, which is shared between multiple operators or multiple service providers and content owners, having each of their interface in trying to promote this. And I think that from a aggregator perspective, and we as Comhem and Tele2 now has always had access to all content in one interface, and continuing to have that is what creates value to the customers. And then I think going direct to consumer can give you something else that can provide you with the capability to be more like a companion app where you add additional statistics and you have maybe you have different angles, you have different ways of sort of integrating together. So if we as sort of the traditional aggregators and the traditional broadcasters would stop competing about the customers and work together and see it as a joint service that we could benefit from, both of us, then I think we would create much more value to the customers instead of trying to compete on who has the billing relationship. Because I think as it's been mentioned before, there's so many benefits of having sort of these fixed mobile convergent services that allows you to do more for more services. So you can package and you can benefit and you can bundle things together in a way that creates much more value for the customers. And then we just have to find the best way of mixing this value between the content owners and the broadcast or the operators aggregating the content.
But you say you can do all of that, and in the previous sentence you said we need to stop arguing about who controls the billing relationship, but you can only do that sort of aggregation surely if you do control the billing relationship. For example, yeah. Netflix, Apple, Amazon integration.
Yeah, I think if we look at what makes value for the customers, then there's no reason to argue about who gets to do the billing and who gets to do that, because we can just ask the customers, if you do it like this, you can bundle it with these services. If you do it like this, you can bundle it with these services. And this is the benefit you get, instead of sort of fighting each other off, because that doesn't really create any value, and it only leaves the ground open for other players to join this battle.
Okay, understood. So you're saying have both options. You either go direct to Netflix or you go to Tele2 and whatever the customer wants. So Guillaume, what's your view on what Thomas has just been saying?
I fully agree, and the fact is that the direct TV, the direct services, direct to consumer services, we can create value by bundling with other traditional pay TV channels. We can make some segmentation around the specific offers. We can build some specific bundles for kids. combining Disney Plus with traditional TV channels or with gaming, for example. You can build specific offers with attractive price by bundling, for example, Netflix with other cinema or series channels. But at the end of the day, we have to give all the choice to the customer, specifically on the a la carte model, so that it can choose either to subscribe directly to the service or to do it through the telco or to the distributor. And we think that because we have current discussions with all these actors, that we know is that they need distribution, because now the competitive the market of SVOD is more and more competitive, and now they're struggling to get the additional customer, and for sure with the customer relationship we have, they need our shops, they need of our thousands of sales representatives, they need to be present on our set-top box. So anyway, we can provide value to these actors, and they already know it, actually.
Okay, so believe it or not, we're actually running into the last 5 minutes or so of our time. It seems to have flown quickly. So I do want to jump onto a question about technology, and I'll bring Giddy back in here. In terms of tech, what are the key tech building blocks of an aggregated service? That's point one, but I'd also like you to touch on the question of set-top boxes, necessary or not, as a part of the technical solution in aggregation today.
Well, first of all, regarding I'd say we look at it when we talk to super aggregators and our potential customers who are basically trying to do a cloud TV transformation, meaning trying to take their legacy system that has done traditional pay TV for a long time and transform it to something more agile, cloud-based, that allows them to compete with some of the guys that we mentioned here, as well as aggregate them. We basically typically look about a tool set that has multiple options that not all of them fit to everyone. But just to give some examples. So we've been focused in most of our discussion today about the big, what I call the big universal syndicators, the big, the Netflixes, the Disney Pluses, the Amazons of the world. And obviously these are services you want to have and aggregate as part of your service. And for that, for example, just having the proper Android TV technology is super helpful. And speaking of set-top boxes, it doesn't have to be a set-top box, but for those more traditional homes that do want a set-top box, the operator tier is a great solution. And Android TV gives you some aggregation out of the box without a lot of effort, providing that you know how to do the integrations right. I think that there are many other types of content that can be aggregated, some of them mentioned here, but there's a whole tier of customers that we work with that are looking to bring in not only Netflix and Amazon, but also other OTT applications or OTT content coming from their market that is more local. And for that, we have what we call a set of playback adapters that essentially allow the super aggregator to play back content that sits on someone else's server with someone else's DRM, but within their own super aggregator application. And believe it or not, if you're not Netflix or Amazon or Apple, you actually allow, and you want your content to be available on many set-top boxes, connected devices as possible, you actually allow super aggregators to do that as a content provider. So that's an important tool for sure. I think the other thing we discussed already, right? Everything to do with discovery, metadata normalization. I think all these are really, really important, and they actually allow you to give the users the right set of experiences. Going back to your question about Android TV, or sorry, set-top boxes. And I think Android TV is part of the answer, right? So I think it's not a necessity anymore in all markets. We're seeing smart TV becoming more and more friendly despite the fragmentation. Smart TVs, dongles of sorts. But for most of the projects that we have with super aggregators, a managed device is still front and center. And if you own a network and you have this device fragment, content aggregation around you on that device, and maybe it's more lightweight, maybe it's Android TV, maybe if you have the money to invest, it might be your own proprietary thing without giving Google access, but that costs more. So I do think that we will see those devices, managed devices, with us for still quite some time for super aggregators.
Okay, we've literally got 1 minute left, so we're not going to be able to run through the final questions. What I'd like to do is ask each of the operators, by which I mean Alejandro, Thomas, Guillem, how do you see the future position of traditional platforms? Putting aside aggregation of broadband and telecom services, which we'll accept is an advantage, just thinking about TV in one quick or two quick sentences, what is the unique selling point, the advantage that you bring to the market? Let's start with Thomas.
I would say that we are adaptive and we're flexible and we can handle different segments.
Okay, Alejandro?
Yeah, I would say address customer choice, give the customers what they need and what they want.
Okay, and Guillem?
Yeah, we have to provide the top content at the day one of the launch. I think the big challenge Apple, Amazon is to take place at home, and today this place is the struggle with the battle is in front of us.
Okay, well, I think we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for joining me. Thank you, everyone who's been listening. I hope you found that interesting. Some of us are going to be available afterwards on Twitter for questions live. So please fire away any questions that you may have. It just remains for me to thank all of our panelists, Thomas, Alejandro, Guillem, Randolph, and Gideon. Thank you very, very much.